Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 1st, 2017 regular meeting of the West Sacramento City Council, and the West Sacramento Redevelopment Successor Agency, and West Sacramento Financing Authority. We're going to start the meeting. We did have a closed session. City Attorney, would you report out, please?
Thank you. Yes, the City Council met in closed session to confer with its real property negotiator on two pieces of property identified in the agenda. No reportable action was taken.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll start this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Our City Manager, Martin Tuttle, will lead. All right, the first item on our agenda is presentation by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the council, and the council is prohibited from discussing issues not on the agenda brought to them at this time, and that's according to state law. So it looks like we have one person who'd like to speak, Evan Taylor.
Hi, my name's Evan Taylor. I'm a senior at River City High School, and I'm president of the Yolo County Anti-Tobacco Youth Coalition. It's a county-wide organization that advocates for anti-tobacco policies and helps educate my peers and other youth across the county on the dangers of smoking and vaping, as well as other drugs, but we primarily focus on tobacco products. I just wanted to thank you guys for passing the smoke-free parks, recreational facilities, and the city properties ordinance. We've done cigarette butt pickups in West Sacramento parks in the past, and we know that smoking is a problem citywide, and we really appreciate this ordinance because it helps both with litter and with making parks a safer place for youth and families and people who just enjoy parks in general. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Taylor. All right, moving on to item 1B, Council Communications Assignments. Are there any reports out? Councilmember Sandine.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. The West Sacramento Flood Control Agency, West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency met on February 16th, and we heard a presentation on setback areas designed to balance future flood protection needs with waterfront development. We also received updates regarding the state of our levees during the storms in January and February, and monitoring is ongoing. Kudos were given to Paul Hosley and Sergeant Kenny for helping get information out to our residents. The Age-Friendly Advisory Committee met on February 22nd, which you, Mr. Johannesson, and I co-chair. We reviewed community input that was collected by mail, phone, and on the web to help guide the development of the Age-Friendly Action Plan. We also heard a presentation from Paratransit about services they provide to help train folks on using transit. We also started to refine the age-friendly action plan direction with more work and community input in the coming months. The Port Commission met earlier tonight, and we authorized the sale of a remnant property adjacent to 3689 Industrial Boulevard, and we also approved a budget appropriation for the design of Stonewalk Trail improvement and building setback line. Also, I attended the 2017 LAFCO Shared Services Workshop on February 23rd, and we outlined the work plan for the year, which will include continuing work on broadband shared services and JPA municipal reviews, and also transparency and open government work, particularly focusing on special district websites and best practices for information access and sharing. And then I also participated in a panel this past Monday for the California Agricultural Leadership Foundation Program. The panel's focus was on local and state community involvement, and there was much interest in the work of the Yolo County Water Resources Association and our efforts to move the county's Sustainable Groundwater Agency and efforts forward. And that's my report.
Thank you. Any reports?
Yes.
Councilmember Rose.
Thank you, Pro Tem Johannesson. I attended the Regional Sanitation Board meeting on February 22nd, and we discussed a few items. A couple that are relevant to West Sacramento are that the South River Road Pump Station, which is just south of the city limits, was awarded, and construction on the ring levee should begin soon. This is a critical part of our Echo Water Project infrastructure, which is greatly needed to keep our sewer conveyance intact. We also approved funding for a Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District Education Plan, program coordinator position, which would be provided through the Outgrove Unified School District. I particularly found this to be an exciting project, especially because it would allow high school students to participate in career pathways programs that would allow them some exposure to what folks do at regional sanitation and perhaps give them the opportunity to consider a career or professional development opportunities with regional sanitation. But another positive externality of it is that children will have an opportunity to visit the habitat that's located on the regional sanitation grounds, which has a lot of wildlife and other opportunities for kids to get to know nature and understand ways that they can conserve and reuse our natural resources. And I think that is a fantastic investment. I brought up how in West Sacramento we had the program with waste management in our early childhood education, and how our young children can learn how to recycle, reduce, and reuse. And we make that investment early on, they then will go back to their own families as ambassadors and teach and spread that word. And I think that this is a positive program that has a similar prospects for our youth, and so I commend them on those efforts. And that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Ledesma? Okay, thank you. All right, so I just, again, attended the age-friendly committee with Councilmember Sandine, and one of the, out of all the surveys, it looks like there's a couple topics that are kind of popping out are going to be, I think, important once we start looking at the implementation plan. Transportation seems to come out on all the surveys in terms of as you're getting older, it's the issue of mobility and independence is it's a prominent point that a lot of folks are concerned about. Public safety and security was another. This basically dealt with well-lit and safe streets and intersections, and also the issue of homelessness came up a bit in terms of public safety. Housing, it's really about particular affordable age, appropriate housing, and universal access and concepts such as that. Communications was another item of concern, and that's really, how do you effectively communicate with all people in your city, particularly older residents who may be technologically challenged, and we've got connection issues and that type of thing. So a very good meeting. All right, thank you. All right, so next item is item 1C, council appointments and reappointments. It looks like we have from the mayor appointing as commissioners to the Age-Friendly Advisory Committee, San Bivens, primary, and Laura Sheridan is alternate, representing the Environment and Utilities Commission, Bernadette Austin, who's a primary appointee, and Andrew Sternfels, who's the alternate, representing the Planning Commission, and Alex Hirsch, who's an alternate, representing the Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission. And the balance of the committee's membership remains unchanged. So we have nominations by the mayor. We need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion
I'll
by.
second.
Okay, Councilmember Ledesma and Councilmember Orozco seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Hearing none. Okay, that motion passes. Thank you. All right, moving on to the city manager's report, or city manager presentation. This is a presentation by Regional Sanitation District on the 5-year rate plan. Ms. Brilliant.
Good evening. Tonight we have a presentation from Regional Sanitation from Christoph Dobson, and he is the Director of Policy and Planning at Regional San. And thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. My name is Christoph Dobson, and I'm the Director of Policy and Planning for Regional San. And tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our 5-year rate plan. Regional San is your wastewater services provider here in the city of West Sacramento, as well as the cities in the county of Sacramento. Quickly, just a little rundown of the presentation. I'm going to briefly touch on our role as it relates to the local sewage collection systems, then talk about some of the drivers for our rate increases that we're talking about, present the rate plan itself and the details, and then most importantly, give information on how someone can attend the public hearing and the protest process. So we've been around since 1982. This is a couple shots of our treatment plant. We basically provide wastewater conveyance and treatment for residents and businesses throughout the region. We were actually a consolidation of about 22 different wastewater treatment plants that were scattered around and providing various levels of treatment. And so we put them all together into one. And this is the service area. You see it's basically the cities, most of the cities in the county of Sacramento, as well as the unincorporated area, and then the city of West Sacramento. We serve more than 1.4 million people, and the treatment plants there by the arrow were tucked in just below the city of Sacramento and just above the city of Elk Grove. The area, the property that we own is actually 3,200 acres. It's a very large area, and it's amazing people don't really know it's there. There are about, of that 3,200 acres, about 1,000 of them are process area. So the part that you see that looks kind of developed there in the middle of the picture, that's the process area, about 1,000 acres. Outside of that, the other 2,200 or so are habitat lands. And they also serve as a buffer. We call them the buffer lands, and they serve as a buffer for the surrounding community. So it keeps down the noise complaints and odor complaints and those sorts of things. And we basically treat the wastewater and discharge it safely into the Sacramento River. And you can see at the top of the picture there, the Sacramento River is up there. It would be to the west. So local sewage collection utilities, there are 4 of them that all feed into Regional San. So Regional San does the treatment, and then we also have very large pipelines. They get as large as 10 feet in diameter, which you can essentially drive a car through, so pretty big facilities. And then the 4 local collection systems then take the wastewater from the homes and businesses and route it down into larger and larger pipes until it gets into the regional system. So those 4 are City of Folsom, City of Sacramento, City of West Sacramento, and then the Sacramento Area Sewer District. And basically the newer cities are within, all served by the Sacramento Area Sewer District. So that's Elk Grove, Rancho Cordova, Citrus Heights, and again, unincorporated county area. We are highly regulated. Every 5 years, we have to get a permit. It's issued by the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and that permit dictates the quality of the water that we discharge. That permit is about 3/4 of an inch thick. It's a big document. As you might imagine, there are a lot of requirements in there, and we have to meet all of them. We can't not meet the permit. If we do, we can be fined, we can be sued, and so basically we just got to meet that permit. Back in 2010, maybe take a step back, we are the largest inland discharger, so not discharging to the ocean, west of the Mississippi River, and we happen to discharge into the top of the delta. And so we have a big target on our backs, and back in 2010, that was kind of front and center. And we ended up with a permit that was very stringent. And the current plant that we have cannot meet the standards that it requires. So that's why we have to build this large project. It's called the Echo Water Project. And essentially we have to remove nutrients from the wastewater, which we can't currently do. And we have to do a very high level of filtration. So it generates a very high quality water. The cost of that project is $1.5 to $2.1 billion. And it has to be fully operational by 2023. So this is a delicate balance because the plant has to be running 24/7, 365. It cannot stop unless everybody wants to synchronize and not flush and not, run your shower or anything for a while. We have to run the plant. So we've likened it to driving a car down the road and rebuilding the engine while you're driving. It's got to keep running, but we've got to build this new piece of the plant. Much of the plant will be replaced, although some parts will remain. The amazing thing, I think, and something we're very proud of, is that this project is currently on schedule and under budget. And 3 years ago, we had a series of rate increases, and I did meetings, public meetings, and meetings like this, and the same numbers were up there, 1.5 to 2.1 billion. And I remember people saying that, yeah, well, we know how these projects go, and it's going to be way more expensive than that. So we're very proud that we're keeping the costs down, and you'll see we put a lot of emphasis on that. We do also a lot of outreach. We send out an annual newsletter. There's a picture of it there. Do a lot of work on our website, signage, social media, a variety of different ways to try to get the word out so that customers have an understanding of why we're doing this project and its significance. So back in 2010, when we first looked at this, we were projecting that our rates out near the end of the construction, so out in 2021, that the rates would be $62 a month. That was basically what it was going to cost to build this new technology. What we did in 2014 is we built a pilot plant. It's literally a small plant that is on our plant site. It could serve a small community by itself, but it's very small in comparison to the overall plant. But the thing about that is it allowed us to try different technologies and to select ones that would work, that we were certain that we could meet the requirements at the end of the day, but also that were as cheap as we could make them. So that ended up saving us hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of the ability to select the right technology. At that time, then, it allowed us to bring that projection down to $50 a month. And then in 2015, another big development is that we received a very large state revolving fund loan. It's about a 1.7% interest rate, which is significantly less than we could get if we sold bonds to finance the project. And that loan of $1.6 billion allows us to save about $500 million in interest alone. So it made a big difference in the rates. We've also done a number of other things to keep reducing the cost, and a lot of oversight and control on the cost to keep the parts we have to build, to keep them at a reasonable cost. So all that put together, we've been able to bring that projection all the way down to $39. It's still significantly higher than the rates were back in 2010, but we're happy that it's not higher than that. And so this is the rate plan that we have. Right now, the customers pay $35 a month, and the proposed increase would go up $1 in July of this year, and then in July of the next 2 years as well, and then 50 cents the 2 years after that. So it's a total of $4 per month over the next 5 years. We have to do outreach as part of state law. Proposition 218 requires us to contact and notify every property owner of a rate increase, and so we've done that. This is a snapshot of our newsletter that we do. It, again, is a way of getting information to people so they have an understanding of the project that we have to build and why the costs are what they are. We also have a phone line for questions, website information. We're doing city council presentations like this, and then we've also had a series of meetings throughout the region as well, public meetings that people can come to. One important point I want to note is that we have a low-income rate assistance program. There's a phone number there that people can call to find out if they're eligible for it and how to sign up. But at least for some of our low-income folks, there's some relief there. It works out to about $150 a year that you would be eligible for. So it's a nice, either a rebate or it's a reduction in your rates, but it works out in the end to $150 a year. And there's the information for the public hearing. It's on Wednesday, March 8th in the Sacramento County Administration Center where the Board of Supervisors meets. 9:30 a.m. And if someone wants to come down and protest or provide feedback, that's the place to be. And that's my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, any questions or comments? Mr. Dobson?
I just have a comment. I had the opportunity to go to the Regional Sanitation headquarters. What do you call it?
Well, there's the treatment plant, and then there's a
Treatment
headquarters.
plant.
We do have a headquarters up in near Rancho Cordova as
That's
well.
what I went to the treatment
Yeah.
plant and met with several of the directors last week and had a chance to take a tour of the treatment plant, found it fascinating. It's huge, and I want to thank you so much for your presentation to our council. You definitely have provided us with a lot of information. If any of my the fellow council members haven't gone yet, I would highly encourage the visit because I found it, I had no idea that, as you mentioned, the treatment plant was there, and once I got on grounds, I didn't realize how vast it was. But thank you so much for coming tonight.
That's a comment that we hear over and over. We have public tours, and if anyone is interested in a tour, it really is eye-opening to see it, to see how the magnitude of it, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and it's heartening to see, particularly keeping this project on budget and keeping those rates down. I know we've got a number of discussion tonight that impacts people financially, and when we're talking about our water rates. It sounds like it's not much, but $1, $2, $3 in the grand scheme of things, a lot of people it makes a difference. But to see the project's well managed, it's well thought out, and we know exactly what's going on with it, why we need it, it goes a long ways. And I appreciate your outreach and your presentation.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So that brings us to the consent agenda. It looks like we have a correction to item number 5. The correction that you have before you is that the recommended action for this item must be modified to state the city council will be authorizing the city manager to execute contract amendment number 1, and then the city manager was a signatory for the original contract, thus the amendment must be executed by him as well. So with that, are there any items on the consent agenda that we would like to discuss separately, or is there a motion?
I'll move the recommended action.
Second.
With the correction?
correction, yes,
Okay, there's a motion made and seconded, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes, thank you. All right, on to item number 8. This is a workshop on proposed parking meter and monthly parking lot rates in consideration of the first reading of uncodified ordinance 17-4 relating to parking meter rates. Mr. Wright. Oh, Mr. Blue.
Thank you.
All right.
We're here tonight to talk about the setting of proposed meter rates in the Bridge District, as well as looking at monthly parking rates for what will be the first surface lot in the Bridge District. Finance has taken the lead tonight because we are talking about revenue collection and rate setting, which we would put into the city's book of imposts, but Public Works is still lead on the project, and so we've got Chris Doherty here, who I'm glad to be his wingman tonight and at the next meeting, but he is the expert on parking issues. So we'll both be responding to your questions during the workshop setting. Next slide, please. I think I'll let you handle that. Tonight's actions are a continuation of the implementation of the council's direction to create a managed parking district. And in doing so, we're taking proactive measures that are intended to protect access to parking for the residents, for visitors and employees. And in doing that, we're creating a pricing structure that will help manage parking resources in the district. So pricing is very important in a managed parking district. And so we also recognize that in starting to price parking, we're going to be impacting the residents in the area, particularly the ones that have had on-street resident parking permits. And then, we really want to ensure that the transition to the new program is responsive to the community concerns. Next slide, please. So the demand for parking is quickly evolving, so getting this pricing structure in place is very important. We have a current visitor destinations like Raleigh Field, which generate thousands of demand for thousands of parking spaces on event dates. We've got the barn, which opened last year, which is now also a special event location. And then we've got 275 residential units that are built now, plus other special events that are held. And coming soon, we've got what we call pipeline projects that are about to pull building permits, or the projects that are under construction. And we're looking at another 401 residential units and about 21,000 square feet of retail. And we're working towards a future where ultimately you're going to have a significant built out. So you're going to have thousands of residential units, up to 13,700 employees at build out. And so the managed parking district is intended at that time to have structured garages that would be located throughout the bridge district, joint use garages. And so starting now will get us to that future that was envisioned in the specific plan. Next slide, please. So tonight, we are going to talk to you about parking rates for the parking meters, and the Fifth and Bridge parking lot rates as well. And then we're going to ask you to take a first reading of Ordinance 17-4, which really has two options. One which just simply sets parking meter rates, and I'll get into in a moment what that rate structure looks like and what the pricing looks like. But our second option is to add a provision that would allow establishment of a residential parking area, and this would be linked to where either the zoning administrator or the planning commission has reduced on-site parking through urban parking standards. And with that reduction, there would be assumption that some of that parking would be on street. So we think that there's a way that we can kind of use that nexus to allow folks who buy into the monthly lot also to park on street around their unit. So there'll be two options that you'll be considering tonight. And then when we come back, next slide, on the 15th, when we do the second reading of the ordinance, there would be a recommendation on a preferred option to bring forward. And then when we come back on March 15th, there'll also be a public hearing, as is required when we amend the Book of Imposts. And as I'll get into in a moment, we're thinking that at that time we would have you approve a rate for the monthly lots for monthly parking of $60 a month, and that would be the initial rate. Next slide, please. Finally, around April 1st, you would have a completion of the Fifth and Bridge parking lot as well as an installation of the meters. Next slide. And key provisions as we move forward are that with the approvals on the 15th, we'd seek direction to go out and do community outreach, let the community know about the changes that are taking place and how they can be accommodated into the new parking lot. You are going to have signs and meters installed, and then we're going to be recommending that the priority for the Fifth and Bridge lot would be given to current permit holders, those who have the permits that are expiring. But then we also have a cap on the number of monthly spaces in that lot. It's 255 spaces total, but we're looking at a cap of about 200 that would be monthly because we do want to have other long-term parking going into that lot. And then we'd be asking you to extend the expiring residential parking permit program for 30 days until April 30th in order to allow us to work with the residents there on moving into the new lot. Next slide. So parking meter rates. They're required under the California Vehicle Code, and we're going to have 338 on-street spaces that will be under the parking meter program, and then a portion of the spaces in the Fifth and Bridge lot. We think that, again, just to emphasize, pricing is the key to protect access to parking for whether you're talking about a business that relies on short-term on-street parking or residents who want to make sure that they have a space when they come home at night and there's a River Cats game and all the spaces might be filled up. We want to protect the parking for them as well. And so in looking at the parking meter rates, we looked at what should the market be? What's the market standard for this area? And we believe that the Bridge District is an extension of the urban core of Sacramento. And as such, the city of Sacramento has already put in place a parking meter structure that we think would work well in the Bridge District and can be adopted by the city council. Next slide, please. So the parking meter rate structure would kind of work like this. There would be a base rate of $1.75 on all meters, and then after that first hour, there's a tiered rate structure, and the tiered rate may be different for different parts of the bridge district over time. Right now, a good starter rate to look at is, let's say, the 2+ meter rate. So the way that that would work is that the first 2 hours, you would be at the base rate of $1.75, and after that, the rate would ramp up. And so again, that would encourage folks to, if they're going to be long-term, they're going to try to go into a lot. If they're going to be short-term, there's a rate structure that encourages them to just stay for a short amount of time. If you want the fastest turnover on the street, you'd obviously do a 1+ meter rate. And 4+ makes it easier for folks to park on street for longer periods of time. So again, in adopting this rate structure, it's going to change over time, and there'll probably be multiple districts or multiple zones within the bridge district. Next slide, please. And here's the location, and when we talk about parking meters, I think of it as, I call them parking kiosks. So we've got the automated system that you authorize staff to go ahead and procure and install the Parkeon machines, and those red dots indicate where they're going to be located. Next slide. And another a rate that the city of Sacramento has that we think is important for our district as well is a special event rate. And so where we have, let's say the River Cats games where you have thousands of cars coming into the district, you really want the River Cats parking to go into the lots that they manage and not to be on street or going into the city lots. So the way this structure would work is that, let's take again that 2+ meter program. If I'm going to the barn to have dinner and I'm in the 2+ meter zone, I could be assured that there'll be spaces there that aren't clogged up with River Cats parking, and I could go for 2 hours, $1.75 an hour. The special event rate would kick in if I stayed longer, and what that would do is it'd immediately jump to a flat rate. So let's say that the River Cats parking is $10 flat rate. We would want to be 25% higher than that in order to create a disincentive for folks to park at the meters when you could park in $10 parking at a River Cats lot. So the idea of the special event rate is that you're going to create a disincentive for those big special events for people to park on street. Next slide, please. And that's the special event area. It's basically the perimeter of the bridge district, the area that's covered by the specific plan. Next slide. This brings us to the Fifth and Bridge parking lot. This doesn't have to be priced by ordinance. It would be done, with your amendment to the book of imposts, and so we want to get this pricing structure in place so that we can begin to move residential parking into that lot. And so what we're proposing is that there be first priority given to the 164 expiring residential permit holders. They would have a first priority on those spaces. But then, as I noted earlier, we'd want to cap the number of monthly spaces in there, because one thing that we're thinking about is that we want a place that's kind of like a visitor all-day parking area. And so we would likely have a all-day rate, which, if it's during a special event, would jump to the special event rate. But let's say we have an early bird special, like you see when you go to the garages in downtown Sacramento. And maybe it's a $10 rate or something like that, because you're going to have residents who have, they have contractors coming to do work at their house and things like that, and they're going to need a place to park. So we do want to make sure that within this lot, we accommodate visitors, longer-term visitors. And then in terms of our pricing of the monthly rate, we were recommending $60 a month as the initial rate. And if you look in your agenda report, I didn't want to have too many slides, but we looked at the market rate in the area for off-street parking, and it's fairly high. And we thought that we need to come in below market. We did not want to test the top end of the market in terms of what we would want residents to pay. But on the other hand, we had to come up with a metric for how we priced it. So generally what we look at is, in an enterprise district, you want to cover your fixed costs, your amortized costs, in this case, the cost of building the parking lot amortized over 15 years. And then you also need to cover your annual O&M. And so that's how we arrived at the $60 a month. So there was a rationale behind it that we thought was a good one. And then, you know, again, an all-day rate, we will come back to you on the 15th and recommend something as an all-day rate, likely something like $10. With that said, you know, once we set these rates, they need to be set by ordinance. With both the parking meters and the off-street parking program, there are likely going to be a lot of changes. So the ordinance that you're going to consider does have a provision where those changes could be made by resolution. And, you know, we come back annually to update the book of imposts. It could be on the annual date when we come back to you, or it could be more frequently. But we understand that as the market evolves here, there'll be need to change what we're proposing today over time. And next slide, please. So in conclusion, our staff recommendations are that you read into the record the first reading with both options of the ordinance, and that you kind of approve our recommended approach regarding operational parameters and rates for the Fifth and Bridge parking lot. To approve the rates for that parking lot, it would be, again, on March 15th when we come back and do that. And then, in order to provide time to work with the residents in the area on the expiring permits and how to obtain a monthly spot, should they so desire to do so, we think that extending the expiring permits for 30 days until April 30th will give us time to do that. So that's our discussion tonight, our presentation, and we'll be available to answer questions you have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bloomberg. Questions for Mr. Bloomberg before we get to public comment?
I do, just one, I know we have probably public comment coming, so I'll reserve some additional comments later. Just a quick couple of things. Thanks, Paul, for the presentation. So the recommendation readings is really just so we can get to the April 15th sort of implementation time. I mean, I think that's kind of one of the driving, we have an expiring program, correct? So it's one of the things we're trying to extend.
So the extension would look at a May 1st start date.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. The April 15th was the earliest we could go, because that would be the effective date of the ordinance.
Right.
But we think that May 1st is a reasonable date to start revenue collection.
I'm also trying to point out that we have a program that's actually expiring by the date, right? The monthly.
Yeah. So the residential permits and the residential placards, visitor placards, currently expire March 31st. And so your action tonight would recommend an extension to that.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that's clear. And then can you expand for a little bit? Because I know you mentioned it, and I think it's an important point about on both options, which you're recommending to move both forward, and but the ability on the option B or 2, whatever, is on the monthly parking and by resolution versus ordinance. You kind of brought that up. Can you expand upon that? That would come back to us, right, for the resolution a year from now if we had to.
Yeah. So no matter what option you desire to choose in terms of setting the parking rates,
right,
we would come back on a regular basis to adjust pricing. And so we wouldn't have to amend the ordinance to adjust pricing. Only if there were some substantive change to the ordinance where, let's say you wanted to modify the rate structure to add a new rate that wasn't in there.
Right.
We would have to amend the ordinance.
Okay. I just want to make sure that was kind of clear. It's in the staff report, you allude to it, but I think you articulate it much better verbally, so thank you. That's all I had for now.
Questions? Just one quick one. On the permits for the spaces at the public lot, or the lot that we're going to construct, are those going to be numbered, or is it just space anywhere in the lot?
Well, right now, we're thinking, we're thinking through having an area of the lot that's clearly identified as where the monthly parking would be. The other option would be, you would have a spot anywhere in the lot. And we're still, that's one of the operational issues we'll come back with on the 15th. That we still haven't decided on. We're kind of figuring, is there a way that you could allow a monthly parker just park anywhere? Basically your license plate is going to be read into a system, so the traffic control folks who come around are going to have your license plate. So you could really park in any space. The concern would be if there were a situation where we didn't have, let's say, traffic controls and you had a big special event and someone said, oh, there's a spot, and they slide in there and so then you create a problem for the people who have the monthly permits. So we're still kind of talking that through, and we'll come back on the 15th.
Yeah, I'm just thinking logistically, it's going to be a lot where you can have a combination of permit parking and non-permit parking. And spaces will have to be fairly well designated, because you're right, in a very crowded night, and you can have neighbors complaining that their space is taken, and, you have the issue of having to get it towed and the whole practical aspect of that.
And then just touch upon the all-day parking idea, the concept that, visitors, you have, family member coming or a contractor. The parking meters would be the ones that manage all-day parking. So like I said earlier, if it was, a special event time, the rate would be what the special event rate was, flat rate. Otherwise, the meters could be programmed to cover like an all-day rate, early bird rate, whatever the council directs us to do.
All right, thank you. Any further questions or comments?
I do, actually.
Oh, actually,
Thank you,
okay.
Mr. Bloomberg. One of my concerns, were I a resident of the Bridge District housing, is public safety. And let's say a resident comes home at 2 in the morning and, is carrying items to their place and has to exit their car. Will the parking lot be lit and the pathways adjoining be lighted, and/or will at some point security be available?
I'm going to pass that one off to Chris.
Good evening. Yes, the parking improvements that are being completed by April 1st, they do include some newer technology lighting. That is the 2-stage motion sensor lighting, so it will dim down when no one's there. When someone moves through there, it'll brighten up so they can see better throughout there. That is being installed with the parking lot. And also, there are plentiful street lights out in the Bridge District, so access getting through to the apartments will be well lit.
Do we anticipate any security or, I'd imagine that at sometimes when we have special events, there might be competition for those spots, and we want to make sure that the residents are protected and making sure that they have access.
We can definitely look into an option like that. We haven't envisioned it now. One option as well is during parking enforcement hours. Parking enforcement officers are coming through on a regular basis, so they are effectively also an eyes on the street.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. So it looks like we have a number of requests to speak on this matter, so I'm going to, it looks like 5 folks. I'll have, call your name, come on up, and essentially you've got roughly 3 minutes, if you can, limit to what you're going to say to 3 minutes. And it doesn't look like it's a real rowdy crowd out there, but try to keep the applause and the boos and hisses down if you can. I appreciate it. All right, the first person is Jessica Kriegel. Please come on up.
Hi, everyone. I'm a resident in the Bridge District and a property owner at the Bridge District and the Park Moderns, and also the Chief Revenue Officer at Fulcrum Property. And I'm here to voice my concern not about the parking meters, but about the removal of the residential parking permits. I have lived in the Bridge District since April of 2016, and prior to that, I lived in the urban core. I mean, what he said earlier about how the Bridge District is an extension of the urban core, I totally agree with. And in the urban core, when I lived there at Capitol Towers, they give free residential parking permits to the people who live, I lived on 7th and N, and I had a free residential parking permit as well as a free visitor permit for people who would come and visit. And then I moved to 7th and R, and I had the same setup. So my concern is that we are now making residents of the Bridge District pay $60 a month for a spot, when in the urban core in Sacramento, it's free. And I don't understand why that is being changed in West Sacramento, particularly given the way that the Bridge District is right now. It is a lot of empty space and a lot of parking spaces all over that area. And so it just feels, I understand that we've got this long pipeline, but we're years away from that actually being built out. And so at this point, it feels odd to charge residents to park in a lot when there is so much parking available, especially when it's available for free in Sacramento. My particular situation, I am a resident in the Park Moderns, which means I have a garage, but I don't have a driveway. So when I have visitors come for dinner or for something like that, I would have to then give them some way of, I would like to give them a visitor permit, particularly I'm pregnant right now in my 3rd trimester, and my mother is going to be visiting every day, ideally, hopefully, when the baby comes. And when she comes, I don't have a mechanism to give her some way to park every day without her having to either pay for the permit or pay for the parking meters, whereas if I lived in the urban core, I would. So those are my concerns. I wish that the council would consider changing the removal of the residential parking permits, because I think that piece is what's not fitting well in this situation. And then the other thing I wanted to say was about the community outreach. I think it's disappointing and unfortunate that part of the plan is that the community outreach happens after this gets approved. I don't understand why there hasn't been more community outreach. I can tell you that the Habitat residents and the Park Moderns residents and also the Rivermark residents have not been reached out to about this. I've spoken with a lot of neighbors in my area and asked them about it, and I know that the awareness is not there other than the grassroots efforts that have been made recently by residents who found out about this. So I'm concerned about the way that this is being rushed through, and I also am concerned about the free residential parking permits and visitors passes being removed for what doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Joanne Mayer.
Hello, Joanne Meyer. I don't ever speak in public, so I agree with Jessica. I am pregnant as well. I moved into the Habitat with my husband in September, so we haven't seen too much of what goes on in like the summertime or springtime with Rayleigh Field or anything yet. But I have a couple concerns with the security as well. With I work at Starbucks. I leave my apartment at 3 in the morning, and walking into my car, if we had the structure or the lot on 5th and Bridge Street, me walking that distance in the dark, I don't think my husband would be too fond of that. Also, the fact of just having to park that far, and once I do have the baby, bringing it back to the apartment or having groceries and whatnot, and just not having, I park where I could see outside my window, just to keep an eye on my car. And if it's off in the distance, I mean, how do we know, like, are there security cameras, or, what if somebody breaks into one of our cars? How do we go about that? Also, another thing is my husband is a cross-country truck driver, but he's going to be going local, so we're going to be doing a pay cut here, and with me going on maternity leave, I'm going to be getting a pay cut. So $60 a month is a huge burden on us, having to pay, and also with, why do we have to pay that coming so soon if, like she said, there's so much space and street parking already that's not really being used up. Why do we have to have these parking meters and resident parking permits so soon? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Sean Took. Is it Toomey?
What's that?
Is it Toomey or Took?
Took.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. My name is Sean. I live over in the Habitat Apartments as well. And I kind of wanted to, touch base on this parking issue. Being a resident there, living there also too with my fiance. I commute during the week to San Francisco about 3 or 4 times a week. I have to be in San Francisco by 8 a.m., meaning I leave my apartment usually around probably 4:30. So safety is kind of an issue too that I'm concerned with, walking from the Habitat apartment to that remote lot. I would kind of like to see a little bit more proposed rather than just increased lighting and maybe just some security. So there is the issue of safety that I'm concerned with as well. The other thing too is the payment or the price of parking for $60 a month. I go to San Francisco because I'm a student. And so being a student, that doesn't give me a whole lot of time to work, and I don't have a whole lot of income coming right now. Basically the $60 a month is, a huge kind of added cost. And now I understand where that cost is coming from because of operation and maintenance for the parking lot and the construction of the parking lot. However, that $60 a month starting out, I believe, is very high. And I understand over the course of time that is going to increase, as we ease into this. But at that point, at that starting point, I don't really agree with that. So the concern with that kind of coincides with my concern for how soon this is happening, and kind of like what Jessica said about the community outreach. None of us saw this really coming. I would like to propose maybe perhaps more community outreach moving forward. And also, too, what she said about was the Bridge District. We have all these projects down the pipeline, but, that's not until the future, so why are we pushing this so soon? I would kind of like to see the permit parking be extended past April, if possible, possibly leaving the remote lot for barn visitors and river cats for the stadium visitors. That would be, I think, more ideal, kind of in the starting. So those were just a few of the concerns I had, and thank you.
Thank you. All right, Shashank Chin?
Hi, I'm Shashank Chitty. I moved to Habitat back in September. I love it. It's got that small time feel, very neighborly. It's awesome. So I just want to start by thanking council members, mayor, and everyone that came here, and for those of you at home that are watching this, thank you. So as far as the parking issue is concerned, like the others have said, this totally came out of nowhere. We didn't even hear about it until just a couple days ago. And so yes, there should have been a lot more community outreach. And so I'm against getting rid of the C permits. My biggest issue is it's safety, just like the other two other speakers have all talked about. First and foremost, it's a vehicle safety issue. If you look at any crime map in West Sacramento, you can see that car break-ins are huge. It's very common, and having a bunch of cars just sit out in that lot that is in an area that's not really developed yet, it's just not a smart idea. There might be lights, but a ski mask lights aren't gonna help with that. Also, I think that there needs to be some sort of patrol. And that has not. I don't think they have really talked about that yet. But that would be great if that was there. And then the other issue is that it's a personal safety issue. Walking home from that area, which it's not developed. It's pretty empty at that area. If you take a look, walking home at night, it's not. It's really pretty unsafe. So I understand the arguments that the people that want to get rid of the C permits have. I understand their issues, but I don't think that all of the solutions have been thoroughly just, thought out. For example, if it's the issue that you want the transient crowd coming in, a couple solutions might be to maybe limit the temporary parking just for the day, and then having the residents be able to park in that area at night. So that way, during the day when the events are going on, there is parking available. Another solution to that transient, having those people come in during the day is maybe just opening up that lot to the people that want to go to the events or that want to go to the barn. Now, if the issue is the public safety issue, I heard that floating around. People don't want people driving in that neighborhood because the streets are so narrow or whatever. I think that having that area open to only people who want to go to Rivers Cats games at the barn, where there's a brewery, I guess, opening up soon. I think that's pretty counterproductive, just because those two things really do attract people that love drinking alcohol, and so that is not really a solution to that problem. If the issue is that it's like public safety issue. So I guess overall, I think that this is very premature action. The area that the lot is in, it's not dense at all, and we're kind of implementing something that the city of Sacramento has, and we keep talking about the city of Sacramento, but we don't have the density or the infrastructure that the city of Sacramento has right now. So it's very premature. So I strongly urge you guys to just maybe have the C permits for a little longer, maybe utilize some of the other solutions, kind of thoroughly examine the other solutions, and then maybe revisit this at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mari Hitzmer.
Hello, I'm Mari Helmer. So we were the third resident to the Park Moderns. So we remember the time when we lived there that there were only 3 houses occupied and nothing else was built. At that time, everybody could come and go and just park in front. There were no permits. Afterwards came the B parking permits that they gave us. Then I think maybe a year after or less, they canceled the B permits and came up with the C permits for the apartment people. So we have given up the right to park in front of our street or even bring up groceries or anything. There's no like loading and unloading zone right in front of our house. Like if I were to have work done in my house and just have like the DirecTV guy come or the carpet guy come, my husband had to drive around the whole Bridge District to see where we could park our car, and there's nowhere to park at all without a permit. We don't have a B permit nor a C permit, so there's nowhere to park for the residents who don't have the permits. So now if you remove the permits from the apartment people, I think you're going to have problems again where they have nowhere to park. And yet there's a lot of empty lots. If you're putting up the barn, and I understand that you put in new additions that you want to build, they should build a parking lot or a space for the barn with valet if they want in that area. If you want parking for the habitats and apartments, then why do you have 90 apartment units and less than 90 parking slots in the apartments? Going forward, it means that everything that you build, we will now scrutinize how many spots of parking are allotted. There's not enough parking in the habitat parking lots for even 1 car per unit. There's not the affordable housing that you plan, the Rivermark. It's planned to have 1 car per 4 units. It's not that the affordable Rivermark has 1 car per 4 units. They have 2 cars per apartment. I think I'm the only resident here in the Beach District, including the affordable housing, the habitat, who has a 1 car, 2 bicycle family. So I'm the only one. I'm the only one that I see biking to work or even taking public transportation. I take the bus, the metro. I've tried it, okay? You don't have a public infrastructure, public transportation structure. The bus comes once an hour, and a lot of times it's late, So maybe the only thing going right now for the Bridge District is Uber, where people going to the barn or the events can Uber there and leave. But what's happening is, I know the mayor wrote a letter, and he doesn't want the Garden Park or the Bridge District to be a privatized parking for the Park Moderns or for the Habitat. On the other hand, I don't believe that Garden Park, where people should come and go, should be able to load and unload, should be the private parking for the barn, which is, I think, where they're going to park. Who's going to park around there? Isn't it the barn? Or people going to the events, which will start at 8 a.m., to 11 p.m. On the other hand is, as Jessica said, her mom doesn't have anywhere to park. Where will she park if they come and go? So for me, in our proposal, I don't know what to do about the people in the Habitat or the Rivermark, because clearly they built those structures expecting people to bike or walk or commute. And as somebody who's tried that for 2 years, it's not actually feasible. This is not New York City. It's not San Francisco. I'm proposing that the garden park has no meters in there. But they have to think, no meters in garden may be around, but then they have to think of, is it 2 hours? What's the number? 30 minutes maximum, but no meter in the garden? I mean, with all of these, because there's so many shareholders and things involved, is we're building structures with not enough parking. On the other hand, is people don't want to pay more than we're paying to live there or to rent there.
Okay, Mr. Helmer, can you try and wrap it up fairly quickly?
The main thing is, there's no way that you can pass this on March 15 and then do community outreach on the 30th after it's been passed, and then you can revisit in 1 year if the parking rates are right. It's the opposite. You have to do the community outreach, tell us the whole plan, and then come back and see whether you're going to pass it.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, you might want to remind the public that we have the 3-minute clock on. And,
We do have a 3-minute clock, and I think it buzzed a little bit, so I neglected to cut you off immediately, but yeah, try to keep it. We have one more speaker, so Frederick Helmer. There is a 3-minute time limit that I appreciate you if you'd.
Thank you, council members. I'll try to make up for my wife's extended commentary by keeping it really short. So my focus and my comments today are a public safety one, and it specifically focuses on the area immediately around Garden Park. I've been a resident with my wife, as she said, for 2 years now. We've seen the entire development and the parking issues and the permits, et cetera. The city and working with the developer obviously allowed for a very narrow street around that very small park and the 32 townhomes that surround it with apartments at each of the cardinal points. When you park a car in front of the house, you can only squeeze one car past it right around that oval. And without a retail outlet that serves alcoholic beverages from 8 to 11 at night, which is coming here at the barn, and, you know, if you want to throw in medical marijuana allowances and legalizing of marijuana, you know, people act responsibly or irresponsibly. We've seen problems before, and now we expect them to increase. And we all bought into that as residents. We understand the walkable, livable approach that the mayor advocates. I think a lot of us are on board with that. We like that mixed community. But I think that from a safety perspective, somebody allowed for a very narrow passage. We see the fire department trying to pass all the time, and they do it pretty successfly. But when you add in this new dynamic and the growth, I think you're going to have much more accidents, more people right up on the curb, and they run over the lawn on the garden park. They hit things on the curb all the time already. I just think it's going to get worse. And my suggestion would be to, as Mr. Bloomberg was mentioning, maybe make just around the park a special zone within the district that limits severely, you know, the time you can park. Whether you charge for it or not, I don't have a say in that, to be honest with you. I'm not concerned too much, but maybe an hour, 30 minutes. So if you can restrict use and get flow going with parking rates, as Mr. Bloomberg proposes, I also would say you could do it with the timing, particularly in a very narrow and I would say unsafe place. And by opening up the space more frequently, I think you'll get that walkable, livable community. The bikes will come through, people will hang out from the barn and not bring their car into that space and create what I call a public safety issue. And that's really it. So thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. All right, that's it for the request to speak. Bringing it back to council for questions and comments.
I'll begin.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you. And I want to thank the public for coming out tonight, and the new neighbors in our newest neighborhood, coming out, all the familiar faces and friends I've seen. So thank you for coming out and voicing your opinion. I know for you, it feels like it's been, this has come across you quickly. It's actually an issue that me personally have been battling with for maybe a decade since Planning Commission. And as we mapped this neighborhood, which we knew would be the densities we're not accustomed to in West Sacramento, and that would be more of an urban core, high-density feeling neighborhood, we knew the struggles we would face when these days occurred, when we actually had people living there. So for me, this is the next step in that evolution. I think part of the point I'm taking out of this for tonight is this will continue to be an evolution as we continue to grow. And I want to make no bones about that fact, is that we're continuing to grow. I thank all of you for being the pioneers that started at the few townhouses around Garden Park, and as Habitat has grown and Rivermark has grown, and now we have the new housing coming up over even across the way at Capitol Yard and down south on Tower Bridge Gateway at the new housing project there. And you know there's pipeline, as people mentioned, there's pipeline projects coming. Yeah, they are. And I am a strong proponent and have been about making the riverfront as exciting a place, livable place, and as from a planning perspective, a beacon for how you can make a community function with transit options, with parking, progressive parking, which is I think what we're going for by having the kind of smart parking meters we've come to. That was always what I envisioned for this area. I know so part of my comments want to frame it in a way as this is sort of the first, for me at least, it's the culmination of, we knew folks would be coming and we'd have to make adjustments on parking because there's more coming. And just like you, in 2 years, there'll be a whole new wave of residents coming in at River's Edge or at some other place that isn't ready to pull parking permits. And more importantly, there'll be more amenities for you. And we've been talking about this for a few years. Council is we need more amenities. And there's always that battle or sort of that thought process around what makes the economic engine grow, right? So you as residents have come here, and there hasn't been a whole lot there. You're seeing empty fields, you're seeing empty parking spaces. I drive through there 2-3 times a week, and I see it during the day. There's no really field activity. The barn isn't operational in the winter, at least not yet. And there's plenty, seems, what are we worried about? And so the dichotomy for me, at least the juxtaposition, I should say, that for me is what we're experiencing actually now in the Washington neighborhood, just north of you, where a year ago, I maybe lamented that where we were with the Washington neighborhood. Although we just struck a deal with the firehouse, Broderick was still there, we had Metro Place, we had the apartments, the housing at 3rd and C. But for me, I just felt like, okay, how do we, is it the right ambiance? We knew that place had bones because it had existing buildings and there were people starting to live there. You go there in the last 2 weekends, as I'm sure many of you have, we have a very vibrant place now. They popped up seemingly out of nowhere. We've had Burgers and Brew come in, Devil May Care ice cream across the street, and now Kitty Corner is the new Bean and Barrel. And I've been there and have this, it's been everything I think we wanted from that neighborhood. And the lesson I'm taking from there, from tonight, is that when it comes, we got to be ready. And part of what I have learned, because I do live in Southport, but I'm a strong advocate for the urban core that you folks live in and making it a vibrant place. The place works because I see folks from all over the city, even outside the city, drive in and find spaces to park on the street because they're driving in. And I see people riding bikes from your neighborhood or from Metro Place walking in or coming in from other parts of town via bicycle on the days we've had sunny. And it has been, for me, a epiphany of how we made that work. We had the same conversation a while ago over Metro Place at Washington Square about how the parking would work, how much residential parking. And it's a lot of discipline. I think Councilmember Sandine was there on the Planning Commission in those days. I know Councilmember Johannesson was there at council around the need to make sure when those businesses came that they had ample parking too. That's the transitionary or the transitory parking that they need to thrive. Because right now, I think, being in the business I am, which is in small business lending, we ask the question, when somebody comes to a business plan for us, what's your parking allotment? How many do you have? And they want to be able to, we want to know, before we give the financing for those folks, what's your parking plan? And having dedicated, even metered parking is important, and that's some of the dynamic that's happening at Bean and Barrel that allowed them, to have people come in. If there was no parking there, taken up by residents, then that would be a problem for them. So I start my conversation and comments about this policy based on that paradigm. I know it's hard to see because we don't have it there. It's not there today. But part of the exercise is we've got to get in the paradigm to be prepared for it, because it is coming, and it will become sooner than you think as Drake's comes in this summer. The program from the barn, and believe it because I'm asking for it. I know our Parks Director just left, but the program at the barn be much more robust this summer and spring and summer. I see our chair of the chamber here, the farmers market will be there on a weekly basis. There's going to be activity there. So I want to be mindful that part of the experience of creating a downtown core is around making sure the amenities that we all want, the energy we want in the neighborhood, it can accommodate the future businesses that are going to see that this summer. And they're going to want to be your coffee shop, or they're going to want to be your dry cleaner, or they're going to want to be your whatever when the buildings come. They're going to want to know there's parking there for them. So I ask you to kind of be open-minded to that. I think I heard from some of you were. I understand clearly the dynamics of adding a cost to your budget, especially for students and for those who are on maternity. We get it. But we're balancing what a broader public need around keeping the riverfront vibrant and keeping it on its trajectory to be a successful part of our city. So I start my comments with that because I think there's opportunity for us to kind of get to a common understanding. I get where you are today, and the part about this seemingly coming on quickly for you, maybe you just heard about this meeting this week and the actual proposals, and whatever way we can remedy that, I would ask staff to really look at. But I think we do need to have these hard conversations about where we're going and how we need to prepare for that growth, because again, it's a bit of a chicken or the egg thing, right? The businesses that are going to want to come in and service you and the rest of the community, which has a stake in this too, because the city has invested heavily into the Bridge District to get it to where it is. We've invested in the barn as a public place, not just a place by a private developer, and the Riverwalk. We all have a stake to seeing you succeed, and I think that's an important perspective. It's specific with the plan. I am supportive of both option A and B going forward, and I want to offer on option B some additional language, because I know part of the issue is around kind of the walkability from back, kind of how we would allot parking options for folks especially in the Habitat area. So I'm going to ask staff, and they could do it on their own. I'm not going to go through the language, but I did want to offer some further definitions of what we might do in option B to further clarify that. Part of the opportunity we have is to give you, or to provide for residents with the residential, is the ability to use the on-street parking, right? So how can we do that in a way that is that furthers the goal of keeping the transitory while giving you the opportunities to use them to unload your groceries, to do whatever else. So we've got to find that balance. So I sort of the language that we put forward is sort of, kind of helps, I think, clarify that a little more. The one question that came up that I want to make sure is clear is on the day versus night, because I think that's a good question. So for Chris, if you can answer a question for me. On the day versus night, so during the day, parking hours will be up until, the metered parking will be up until
10 p.m.
10 p.m. And after that, residents are free, it's
Free to park on the street.
free to park on the street. So again, it's the opportunity during that time where you can, you know, if you need to buy, you may have the monthly lot, but you also may be able to get into the parking space at 9 o'clock and you're done for the night, if you find one close by. So that opportunity still exists.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, and the whole night you could be there, or a guest can be there at that reduced rate. So, okay, I just want to make sure that was clarified. And then the other part that I'm taking away a little bit on the staff, I'm sorry, I just want to go back to my notes, came up earlier. It came back in why I asked the question about the resolution versus the ordinance, because I think part of what was brought up before was how we've, one of the members of the public came up and talked about, we started this way and then we changed and went to this way, and probably have news for you again, it's going to change again. And I think that's okay. I think that's part of the process as we learn and as we grow. So the fact that we offer to change this via, especially the monthly parking program, can change this via resolution is actually a good solution, because that way we get more flexibility and we can learn and adjust as we go. So again, part of what I tried to get to is trying to articulate a little clearer around how we might set those. And thank you, Chris, I don't have any other questions, but one of the things I want to make sure as well is clear, because I heard this, is around bus service and other transit. This whole plan for years has been based on not just parking needs. We've actually looked at parking and the densities we require is very, we knew that it was going to be tight, which is why we put so much emphasis on streetcar and so much emphasis in transit. And I hear you as a member of the Yolo County Transportation Board, I hear you very loud and clear around how we need to approach service to get you to and from the areas you need to go. And I will take from this the need to go back to the transit district and see how can we improve upon things like the Y shuttle, which is where we originally intended. It mimics already the streetcar line. It just starts at City Hall, stops in front of Reilly Field, gets you across the bridge. I've taken it almost every time I've gone to the Kings game, except one time I walked home from the Kings game back to the Bridge District. But again, those are the kind of options that we need to do a better job of making sure are ready, because our whole plan, the transportation plan for the Bridge District is based on our ability to get those done. So I hear you loud and clear that we need to redouble our efforts to make sure residents have options, because it was always intended that once for those in the townhouses, you have parking, you do have parking garages and you have driveways that you can park. But our intention was that you wouldn't have to get in your car again. That's why we're looking at streetcar, that's why we're looking at transit, and bike share even is going to be an option coming soon. So I'm trying to give you the long view. I understand the short view feels painful, but that's what the process is we're going to try to work through, and how can we get there. So I'm hoping we can find some common ground upon what we're trying to get to, because my worst fear is that in 2 years we get a sudden boom in building and we get restaurants and there's nowhere for people to come and park. And there's no worse complaint that I get from my own family when we go somewhere that's very popular and you can't find anywhere to park when you want to go there. And that's been one of the blessings of what we've learned so far in Washington, is there is somewhere that we get to when we're not riding bikes, and there hasn't been that many opportunity to, but that you can park. So I'm supportive of keeping these two options on the board, and again, I'll offer some language of how we can further provide better opportunity to refine that notion of the kind of the hybrid motion, the hybrid method on option B. So again, I'll give you that and give staff that and give council that as another consideration. And I think there's copies out there somewhere that we can folks can look at. But again, those are my comments. I know I went a bit long, but I feel compelled to because this has been a long time, a long time coming, and a long road to hoe still. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yes, Councilmember Sandy.
Thank you, Mr. Johannesson. So my comments are similar to Mr. Ledesma's because I've had this, I think because of some of the similar experiences. So my nearly decade on the Planning Commission, we talked about creating an urban, kind of an urban core versus, and compared it to the suburban and the kind of rural parts of the community. And we were looking at how folks coming in and building in the urban core, what we kind of released some of the parking constraints and allowed for more building and we're expecting transit. And so I think that's kind of brought us what's here today, but it also is, we're going to continue, as Mr. Ledesma said, to have more and more density. And so I actually was going to ask Mr. Doherty, I have just a couple of questions, just to kind of refresh our memories. I've been on the council now for about 3 years, and I believe that the parking in the Bridge District has come up almost at least every year in those 3 years. So because I heard the concern about outreach and involvement and community input, can you just remind us kind of the time frame when it came to us? I believe, at least in this issue, where we were looking at the resident parking was in October. Is that, I'm just trying to get the time frame again.
Correct. We did start the process to, the discussion had a workshop in September, I believe,
Okay.
to talk about trying, after coming off a summer where there was a lot of parking friction with the big events in the barn, and a lot of parking on the street from the residents. We got complaints from both sides that there was just a lot of parking friction. What that drove the decision to start to unfold the residential parking to a more appropriate, longer-term location off the street, so that we could free up the street parking assets for what is to come, what is going to be the start, will be the barn, and then other commercial projects moving forward. So we started that project in September, and then have been, I think we've been to council, I want to say every council meeting with something parking-related since then.
And then in terms of the questions about outreach, what's that looking like to you? And was there an opportunity? There would have been opportunity earlier on. I'm just trying to understand if we make these processes as transparent and open as we can, what they look like.
Of course. We were hesitant to go out to the public with this idea before we knew what those rates were going to be for the park, the off-site parking lot. Didn't want to go out with half the story. So that's why we wanted to come to you to approve what the rates would be, and then go out to the public to then talk through what the whole plan would look like moving forward.
Okay. And then stay there because I have another question. So we've done a lot of referencing back to Sacramento on the rates, and then so I know the market rate is something that we were tagging to Sacramento, and then but not the market rate for the monthly because of the condition of the kind of parking it is. And then what about the comparability to Sacramento? One of the community members mentioned that their experience is different with those permits, which I know in our case are expiring the end of this month unless we take an action tonight. But I'm just trying to get the rationale, like when we compare to Sacramento and when we
Sure.
are doing our West Sacramento thing.
It is difficult to compare to Midtown Sacramento and older established neighborhoods. We are somewhat more similar to what would be the rail yards in probably about 10 years from now, where there's some actual development there. It's a large swath of undeveloped land with new urban coming in. So, and then thrown in our arena next door, which complicates parking management greatly in there. So there really isn't a comparable area that has the same context that we have in Sacramento, but there's a lot of very similar context when it comes to the parking rate structure, we feel, is this kind of same look and feel throughout the entire area. When you look at the downtown core, remove the jurisdictional boundaries, really, we are an extension of downtown. So we think that rate structure and that look and feel of the parking management, there are benefits to having that look and feel the same as Sacramento's regime.
That's helpful. I just wanted to have some of that answered. So as I'm thinking through this action tonight, I too would be supportive of the second option. I'm trying to understand, Mr. Ledesma, your suggestion, though. I don't know that I fully understand that. And the second option that came in was an addition from that was kind of a tweak from the last time this came to council in terms of having provisions to establish a residential parking area. That's the option 2. Is that correct? Can they go together as 1 and 2?
Tonight,
Tonight,
they can go to forward, and
Okay.
that decision can be made on the 15th at the second reading, yes.
And then, Mr. Ledesma, can you just explain a little bit more here? Thank you.
Sure, and I think what you see in front of you is just some language that wanted to give some guidance on how we might attain to how many spaces might be allotted for, especially on attached dwellings, on apartments. It's one of the concerns. We want to make sure that in the resolutions, I think the last sentence of that first paragraph, and I should point out that italicized is sort of the added language. It really, we want to make sure that there's, in the language, we give some more guidance about how we can ascertain how many lots per, spaces per dwelling can be considered. Part of what isn't articulated in the current language is things considering lots that are available nearby, transit areas that are nearby. I think what we're trying to get to is we should be considering it all and not just it's a 1-for-1 parking area, therefore I get one more parking area up here. I think we've got to consider the full transit option. So I think that's part of the language we have in here as well, is trying to make sure that that is considered. And when the administrator makes that, gives them the guidance about how we make those decisions going forward.
And if I could, Mayor Pro Tem and Council, just for clarity from staff's perspective, is this a third alternative that you're directing us to analyze and bring back on the 15th? Could we do we have, currently in the staff report, we have 2. We have a third now that Mr. Ledesma has proposed. This would be the first reading on that. Could we have, is the goal to have 3 or amending a second one tonight? I think from a staff perspective, we would like to see it clean and be able to analyze this option
And that's totally
separately.
fair.
Separate,
Yeah, I think that's fair if council would oblige as another option and making sure that on the, staff has a chance to.
Yes, I think to maintain this as the first reading, if you would agree that this could be presented as a third option, and then when we come back on the 15th, the council can
see
select
what you're
from
saying.
one of the
Yep.
3 options.
Gotcha, okay. That makes sense.
All right. Any further?
I'm good right now.
Councilmember Roscoe?
I'll make my comments short. Chris, I'm finished. I don't have any questions. I just want to thank the members of the community who came out tonight to present before the council. I'm relatively new to this discussion, and I learned a lot from your comments. Of course, we all want to strike a balance between the needs of the residents as well as the needs of the greater community. I mean, there are great investments made in the area. We have several vibrant businesses that our citizens want to enjoy, and public amenities that are exciting and new, and for which all of our tax dollars, well, not all, but I mean, a lot of our tax dollars paid for. And so we want to make sure, at least I want to make sure, that those areas are opened for enjoyment for families and for folks who've never had the opportunity to experience a vibrant riverfront. And so while I do not need to be a resident of the Bridge District in order to understand those concerns, specifically the public safety concerns, I'm grateful that you came with these informed comments so that I could learn a little bit more about what it must feel like to live in the area and have these challenges that you face. But at the same time, I do look forward to finding a resolution that does strike the balance and is somehow, I don't think there's going to be any one fit where everybody, stands up and says, hooray, right? We all have to compromise in some way. But I do look forward to being part of this conversation and trying to find some mutually beneficial way of finding that compromise.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think, we've had similar issues when we had the community center go in and the parking there, because it was basically structured as a transit-oriented development in our downtown right across the street, and parking is limited, so we've been dealing with that over the last number of years since that has been installed. But in this particular area, the streetcar is going to be there in 4 years, maybe, hopefully, less. And that's going to really, that's kind of the game changer. And when you kind of look at how to do transit-oriented development in Greenfield, it's really, really tough, because you basically have a field that you're trying to plan for up immediately. And, it takes years for development to start, so the idea would be to show that it is going to be transit-oriented development by having policies in place, by having streetcar lines lined out, having everything planned. So the developers that come in can say, okay, well, in 3 or 4 years, this is the way it's going to be, and now we can design our properties accordingly. And everything then will come up at one time. We kind of saw this, some of us took a trip up to Portland a couple of years ago and looked at their streetcar system, and on the north side of town is where the first line went in, and it showed how successful it would be in that particular distance. And then the line that went in south, you had the buildings coming up at the same time as the tracks, because people knew exactly what the density, how density would affect, transit and car use, and that type of thing. So that doesn't mean that it's not going to be problematic for folks. And I do appreciate the folks that have come up and spoken today. I don't live in the district. I'm not there at midnight and having to park my car in the middle of the night and walking to my place. And I certainly get the security issue. And I'm not sure if there's anything we can do on that lot to address the concerns of lighting, cameras or whatever, because, I think it would be problematic if you have your car parked in the middle of an empty lot, or 5 cars in a lot and you're a ways away, and it could be kind of an attractive thing for people to get into. So it's not going to help folks in ski masks, but, we can, maybe put some more eyes on it until we actually have real eyes. So I think we should maybe take a look at that. The thing about having this, I'm totally supportive of Mr. Ledesma and the proposed language, adding it to option 3. I think that'll go a long ways to the folks that have had permits and they have limited parking in their units right now. But the nice thing about doing this as a resolution based in the future is we can have public comment. This isn't the end of the discussion on parking in the Bridge District. It's going to continue to go on, so the folks of you that are engaged in this keep being engaged, and there's always chances for us to modify things. Rate structure I'm fine with, the way the rate structure is laid out. And the only other issue would be the fee, the $60. And I do, one of the things we're trying to do in our housing is we're trying to develop all modes of housing for all levels of affordability. So some folks, $60 a month may not be a big difference, but obviously $60 is a lot for other people, and I can totally understand that. It's going from, $10 a year now to $60 a month. That's a chunk of change, and for someone who's on limited income, that's tough. So I don't know what we can do on that, to roll it in slower, or to maybe kind of help some of the concerns. I think over time, we're going to have to capitalize the cost of this and the operation and maintenance. I mean, we've got to do that, otherwise we're going to have a fiscal deficit, and it's going to be coming out of a park or, police or something like that. So we've got to be careful with making sure we fully fund these things. But there are, I think, possible ways we might be able to lessen the pain initially, and then it means it's going to happen sooner or later. But right now, when it's the development stage the way it is, maybe it is an idea to see if we can do something to help the financial end of those permits, and then that coupled with the proposal that Mr. Ledesma proposed, I think would be a good starting point for this. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, thank you all very much.
I just want to
Yes, Mr. Ledesma.
thank you. This does require an action, right? We have to extend? Yeah, so while this was a workshop, and the
Okay.
first reading of the options and the parking, I just want to be clear for the public. So we're
Yes.
not approving
You're
the
approving a
ordinance
30-day
tonight.
extension of the
Yeah,
residential
we're
parking.
approving a
permit.
30-day extension. So with that,
Okay.
I'll make the recommended, I'm sorry.
You're good.
Thank you. I'll make the motion for the recommended action on extending the program.
Or is there a second on that? Okay. Councilmember Sandin, seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Thank you.
All opposed? Hearing none? Okay, that motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, on to item 9. This is consideration of presentation and first reading of ordinance 17-3, repealing and adding Chapter 8.08 of the municipal code relating to refuse and recycling.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council members. Paulina Benner, Environmental Services Manager. Purpose of this item is to introduce ordinance 17-3 that repeals and replaces a section or Chapter 808 of the West Sacramento Municipal Code. Staff is recommending that the council waive the first reading and read this ordinance by title and number only this evening. The purpose of this chapter, otherwise known as the Refuse and Recycling Ordinance, is to govern collection of solid waste within the city and to set policies and programs to reduce the amount of waste that we send to landfills. In addition to the ordinance, I've also provided a red line version of the code that's attachment 2 to the agenda report, and that shows in detail all of the areas where there's edits, additions, and deletions, so you can see how the code looked before the changes the proposed changes would go in. These changes provide general housekeeping updates to certain areas. We have changes to department names, different city processes, and current terms, as well as 3 more significant changes that I'll talk about briefly, each of those. The first one is related to the construction and demolition debris recycling requirements in the code that are under the California Green Building Standards, which is also known as Cal Green. The language in the ordinance will now incorporate the Cal Green requirements into our code that will allow the city to enforce the new 65% diversion requirement that Cal Green has, as well as the ability to apply that requirement to the types of projects that are listed in Cal Green. The incorporation will also capture any future updates to Cal Green. That way we can just, instantly enforce them without having to come back to council to amend the code again. If we don't make this update, we won't be able to enforce the Cal Green requirements, since our code currently requires a specific diversion rate of 50% and has a specific list of covered projects that doesn't match Cal Green. So it's important to make these changes so we can actually have enforcement there. The second significant changes is to updates to definitions and some additional definitions that were added. This is creating consistency between the code and our new waste management contract. So things like the bulky waste, garbage, and recycling materials definitions were updated to match that which is in the new contract. And then we added a definition of food waste and organics that is a new program from our new contract. The final major change is to the definition of what is a permitted hauler. The purpose of this update is to allow the city to create a permit system for haulers that haul organic and recyclable materials from commercial customers in the city. The reason we want to add this requirement is currently it isn't covered in our exclusive franchise, and it also isn't covered in the non-exclusive hauling permit system, so it's kind of this gap services. And there's a chart in your agenda report that further describes each of the different the exclusive permit and the non-exclusive, and then these kind of gray areas that we're trying to capture. The code establishes the ability for the city to establish administrative policy that would govern this new permit. And the permit would also require haulers to report customer and tonnage data to the city, which we could use to comply with the state's mandatory commercial recycling and mandatory commercial organics recycling laws that require the city to track and report commercial customer compliance data. We do that in our annual reports to the Department of Resources, Recycling, and Recovery, which is known as CalRecycle. The new permit requirement might have a minor fiscal impact on new haulers. It won't impact our existing haulers, since they already have a permit to haul trash in the city. They would just have a new reporting requirement. But if there are haulers out there who are doing just organics or recycling, they may have a very small impact by having to get new insurance coverage to meet our contract requirements. but they won't have to pay any fees on the revenue that they earn from hauling the organics and recycling in the city. If we don't make this update, our current practice of having to ask for voluntary information on this data would continue, which so far hasn't been very successful. So what we're trying to do is put a system in place where we can get data on a regular basis that we can use for our compliance annual reports. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions for Ms. Benner? Seeing no questions, thank you.
Great.
All right, any comments from council, questions, or a motion on this action item? Do we have a motion?
Move the recommended action.
We have a motion by Councilmember Sandin, Councilmember Orozco seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. All right, motion passes. Thank you. All right, on to item 10, council calendar.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the City Council. We have one event that's coming up that might be of interest to you. It's on March 22nd. It's the YOLO Leaders Forum, otherwise known as YED Spring 2017. It'll be at UC Davis from 4 to 6 p.m., and the topic is from national policy to local government, potential impacts and opportunities. New information recently is that Darrell Steinberg has been confirmed as the keynote speaker. So it should be very interesting.
Great, thank you very much. City manager report?
No report.
All right, city attorney report?
No report.
Any staff direction from council members? Seeing none. All right, any future agenda item request by council? Seeing none. All right, so we have a motion to adjourn.
I would like to I'm sorry, Mr. Orozco, would you? No. I would like to make a motion to adjourn and thank my cousin Victoria for coming out with me tonight. And I'm proud that she's my cousin and chose me as her mentor, but I think I've learned more from her today than anything else, so.
I'll
Anyway,
second that.
thank you.
All right, do we have a motion made and seconded? All in favor? Say aye.
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 Aye, opposed? Hearing none. It passes. Thank you.